with the fact that I just
All right.
is not, no, that's okay. Wrong with the fact that I am not wired for this kind of conventional white picket fence life that we're told that we want. And so I had gone through a ton of therapy. I had read all these other books, listened to all these podcasts, and done so much work and thought to myself, what if I could help other people do in a much shorter period of time what it took me years to do? And what's the book that I would have needed? Not just with, okay, you're enough and you deserve pleasure, but okay, here are the apps to go try. Here are the exact words to use with people, and really taking out the guesswork and giving folks as much tangible stuff to work with as I possibly could. So the book was born, as with many, self-help or nonfiction books, out of a need of wanting to give other folks an easier shortcut to their journey than the one that I had.
So it starts, the part that surprised me a little bit, um, because I expected the sex bits, right? But as the beginning is really just like looking at me, which I
Yeah.
love. I've been on a personal growth journey for a long time. But looking at like where we get the messages we get about not just sex, but what it is to be a woman and what romantic relationships look like and what our role in that is. Um, was that part of that much lengthier process for you, figuring out like how to get deep into where that comes from?
Yes, for sure, for sure. And really, let's talk about the fact that this book is called The Sex You Want, but we don't even really get to that much sex until the third part of the book. So part one is your relationship to yourself. Part two is how to have better relationships with other people. And then part three is how to have the kind of sex you want. I was given a great level of artistic license in writing this book. The one thing where my publishers would not budge was on the title. So here's a little peek behind the curtain of how publishing works. I did not want sex in the title because I don't believe this is a book about sex. And but I'm not the publisher, and their job is to sell books. So right, this isn't just a book about sex, because ultimately, if I were just going to say, all right, go try these positions and you'll be fine, right? Um, use these words in the bedroom and you'll be great. That isn't going to matter if you don't feel safe in your own skin. That isn't going to matter if, the messages you've gotten growing up have told you that women's pleasure is kind of either unnecessary or plays second fiddle to male pleasure. So there's so much inside out work to be done here. And really, The Sex You Want, the book, is the same, it mirrors the same journey that I take my coaching clients through. We don't just start talking about sex on day one. We really start to develop a rock solid relationship with yourself first, and falling in love with yourself, taking yourself out on dates. And then and only then do we start to look outward. So you're absolutely spot on that The Sex You Want, I mean, it definitely starts with sex, because the prologue is probably the the most graphic part of the entire book, and I won't spoil what you'll see in the prologue. But really, the first part of the journey is just one that starts only with you.
And one of the things I really loved, and that I know, so I have a group of girlfriends I go to brunch with at least once a month. And then we also have a spicy romance book club called Heated Discussions at the Store. And I know girls from both of those groups are in the audience tonight.
Hi,
Um,
girls.
and some of what we've talked about a lot in both of those groups is the 27 things exercise. They've all at least gotten there, which is early on. It may be the first written exercise.
Yeah,
And and what I love going into that is that you make a clear distinction that when you say intimacy goals, you don't mean sex. That's not a code word, because I think so often we use those interchangeably. Like intimacy is just what we call sex for polite conversation.
exactly. Yeah. And intimacy is showing up in the world around you. It's showing up for yourself. And yes, of course, sex is a part of intimacy, but when I say intimacy, it's allowing yourself to be truly seen. And so some examples I give of non-sexual forms of intimacy, that were examples that former clients of mine had put in their 27 things list, because if you'll remember, I give you just some examples to get your mind going of like, what could this look like? is wear a two-piece to the beach. Give a friend a genuine hug if they're feeling down. Be the one to say I love you first. And every person's 27 things list is going to be unique to them. And intimacy and what that means is going to vary person to person. But I give these examples to give the readers an opportunity to expand what you think and what your definition of intimacy is. Because I'll tell you now, having worked with over 100 women one-on-one as clients and having educated thousands of women now, there are people out there who are like, I don't have hangups when it comes to sex. I can have sex with strangers, I can meet someone at a bar, go home, have, porn style sex, but I don't I have a hard time letting my guard down when it comes to talking about my feelings, right? So there's intimacy, there's emotional intimacy, which is, yeah, the kind of conversation you would have with a best friend and really opening up. And then there's sex, which is just the mechanics of sex. And so oftentimes what I see is the sexual intimacy is also where people struggle. It's okay, I can do the mechanics of sex, but I can't just be myself. Either I'm faking orgasms or I'm not asking for what I really want, or my pleasure and my needs aren't even being addressed in the room. So that's kind of, where sex and intimacy come together. Sexual intimacy is my area of specialty, but intimacy is a much larger umbrella.
I was just having a conversation with someone not that long ago about how I've had some not wonderful relationships in my adult life. Um and I did some work around that after my last divorce. And one of the things that came up for me is that I had this very distinct memory as like a freshman in high school, sometime early
Mhm.
in high school, sitting down at a table with my girlfriends and saying, I wish that I could just have two boyfriends, one for the physical stuff and one for the emotional stuff. And how much that just carried on through all my adult relationships. Like my romantic partnerships were for sex, and I got the emotional stuff from my girlfriends. Like the idea of bringing those two things together was terrifying for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I was working with a client recently who's a survivor of sexual trauma. She is married in a really wonderful relationship. She loves her husband a lot. And she said, she's now in a really great place sexually with her husband, but she said, it never occurred to me that sex is something that is supposed to be fun and connected. Because to her, it was always just, either a source of pain because of her trauma or something that she did to get boys to like her. I'm going to use her words here, but not something that's actually a way to bring people together because most of us aren't being taught that in terms of what the purpose of sex is. And yeah, there are many purposes of it, but ultimately it's a way we express ourselves. It's, like singing or dancing. It's a way we connect with each other. It is one of life's greatest joys that's absolutely free, in my opinion, as far as it being one of life's greatest joys. And a reminder to everyone, who's listening right now that the clitoris is the only part of the human body whose sole purpose is pleasure. It serves no other function. We don't need it to have babies. We don't need it to go to the bathroom. There's literally a part of our body, ladies, that's just there for us to feel good. And that's your reminder in terms of, okay, well, am I doing something wrong here? Like, well, your body wouldn't have this thing in it if you weren't meant to feel good, right? I'm just looking what's going on in the Q&A here. Do you want to be the one to moderate the Q&A here, Anna?
Sure,
Or
yes. So we had someone ask, what would you recommend when your client or reader is struggling to come up with 27 things,
yeah.
especially when they want to add sexy time things but don't know what they want?
Right. So that's one of the reasons why I give a whole host of examples in the book, not for you to copy and paste, but to get you thinking. And so if that doesn't help, think about if you've, say, for example, you've started your list and you're like, all right, I don't really know where to go from here. Take a look at the list that you have and see if you can get a bit more granular with some of the items that are already on there. So, for example, say your list says, I want to be more present during sex. What does that mean? Right? Does that mean I want to be able to have sex with the lights on? Right? Does that mean I want to be able to maintain eye contact with my partner? Does that mean that I want to stop faking orgasms? So you can make the goals and the items on your list a lot more measurable, which is what I always suggest. But say you're like, Rena, I don't even know where to start, like in terms of figuring out sexy things that I want. Um, Porn is a good place to kind of expand your imagination. I recommend a few ethical porn sites in the book, in the chapter in the book called Make Porn Your Friends. And erotica, Dipsy is a good if you're more into like audio or literary erotica. So getting some ideas there and just going out and saying, I don't know what I don't know. Just like if, you had only ever had McDonald's your entire life and I asked you to come up with a list of 27, kind of culinary experiences you would want to try and you're like, this is all I know. Go and start dipping your toe into what else is out there. You might go and watch some cooking shows, right? Oh, that looks pretty interesting. You might read some articles. Same goes for sex. Go out there, listen to some erotica, watch some porn, and see what piques your interest and go from there.
Yeah, so I'm in a wonderful relationship with a really supportive partner for the first time ever. It's exciting. And when we first started seeing each other, he asked me what I was into, and I had like 4 or 5 things. And
Hmm.
then he was like, "Okay, but is there anything else you wanna try?" And I was like, "I gotta be honest with you, like, my previous experience has just kind of been I'm open to try whatever my partner wants to try, so do you have suggestions?" And he was like, No, that's not" like, he was confused by that, and I was like, "Oh, no, I don't know." So also for me, just, like, going into a sex shop and, like, looking at toys, I'd had, like, one kind of standard vibrator my whole life. And so, like, realizing there were other things out there and kind of figuring out what they were for, and you can also do that online. You don't have to go into a physical space if that makes you uncomfortable. But that was really because I didn't even know what the choices were really, and
Oh,
it's the
there's
same way.
so many now. So many. And I have the luxury. I know my job is really rough that companies will send me toys all the time to test out. And just the amount of technology that exists now. And if anyone ever needs a toy recommendation, send me a DM on Instagram because I've tested so many. I will tell you which ones to go to. Um, but again, you don't know what you don't know. And that's part of it is just trying things, trying anything once. I will say, even if you're shy to go into a brick and mortar store, oftentimes there's going to be a limited selection in even the best brick and mortar store because there's so much available out there. So porn is also cool in that way because on most toy websites, you're not going to get to see what this toy looks like in action. So I will get, people messaging me, "Hey, I watched this porn and can you explain to me what this toy is?" Or, "Oh my gosh, I didn't know that existed." So, if we think of porn as a tool, which again, something I say in this chapter in the book, that saying porn is evil is like saying knives are evil because people get killed with them. Porn is a tool. And if we use the tool ethically, we go to ethical porn sites, we understand that these are people who want to be there, who are being paid equitably. Most of these are women run sites. Then we can feel good about consuming content as the data tells us that we tend to have better sex, better orgasms when we watch porn on our own, and it doesn't impact the partnered sex we have either. So I encourage you to make porn your friends. I'm responding to Kristen real quick. I love the cooking analogy. Food analogies are my thing, so I appreciate that. I can always find a way to equate sex with food.
Hey, well, as long as we've jumped into sex already, you talk a lot about ethical non-monogamy in the book, in the later parts. And just in case, because I had an unfortunate experience where I used ethical non-monogamy out loud for the first time when I was having to give a police report for some unfortunate things, and then had to try and explain it to the police officer. So just in case there's anyone who doesn't know how to explain, like what's an easy way to kind of sum up what ethical non-monogamy encompasses? Because I know it's a spectrum.
Yeah. So let's think of what unethical non-monogamy is. And if you see movement behind me, that is my cat Chooch, um, who's hanging out on the sofa behind me. So unethical non-monogamy, that's cheating, right? So ethical non-monogamy, let's think of it as a big umbrella. all the different ways that it would be okay for you to either have sex or have romantic relationships with somebody outside of a partnership. All the ways that we could do that. So if we have this big umbrella, there's so many different flavors of non-monogamy. That can look like, you and your partner go to a play party together and maybe you make out with someone right in front of your partner. That could be you're polyamorous, meaning that you have concurrent relationships. So, like, for example, I am polyamorous. I have a primary partner who I write a lot about in the book. He is my primary partner, so we are hierarchical, meaning that our relationship is kind of, our priority. And then we each have other partners. We all know about each other. We're all cool with each other. That's one way of doing it. There's a term called monogamish that was coined by Dan Savage, which basically means, for all intents and purposes, me and my partner, we're monogamous. But we have some understandings, like if I'm traveling for work, if you're at a bachelorette party, right? And something happens, like a one-time kind of thing, not the end of the world. And then you can decide, well, do I want to know about it when it happens, or do we want this to just be a don't ask, don't tell, a DADT kind of policy? Um, Having a threesome, that's ethical non-monogamy. Having open relationships where you have the freedom, not necessarily to be polyamorous and have other boyfriends or girlfriends or partners, but just like, yeah, I'm free to hook up with who I want. That's one type of ethical non-monogamy. So there are so many different ways to practice it. And if one style doesn't appeal to you, it doesn't mean that you're not suited for all of it. Just like if you don't like bananas, it doesn't mean that, you're not into fruit. See, here I go again with the food analogies. But it's not for everyone. Some people are wired for it in the same way, wired for non-monogamy, or rather not wired for monogamy, in the same way that certain folks aren't wired to be heterosexual, right? So there are people who are just wired that way. I happen to be one of those people. Then there are people who choose to practice non-monogamy for kind of practical reasons. So, hey, we're in a long distance relationship, right? And we want to have some freedom there. Or, hey, I have this really specific kink and you are not into that at all. So I have the freedom to maybe just explore that with someone else. Or, hey, you're straight and I'm bisexual. So I have some freedom to still be able to explore that part of me, or maybe we have threesomes together. So there are practical reasons, and then there are these kind of innate, like wired identities that folks have. So that's probably the quickest, dirtiest overview I can give you of that umbrella of non-monogamy. But I think it's interesting because this topic, the topic of non-monogamy, can make a lot of people really squeamish because especially if you are in a committed monogamous relationship. Some people are like, I don't want to hear about this. I don't want to hear about this. And so I will say now that the rates of people practicing ethical non-monogamy are going up year by year. So even if this is not your thing, be a good ally and understand it so that if a friend comes to you and is like, hey, I want to try this, or my partner and I are trying this, you can be a source of support rather than somebody who's going to ostracize them and make them feel like they don't belong.
And then related, one of the questions that came up in Q&A is how do you bring up opening a relationship that has been closed in the past, which you do
Ooh,
pretty well in the book also.
yeah, yeah. Okay, I didn't see that I needed to scroll down here. Okay, so easiest way I can do that is go to your partner and be like, I was at this webinar with an author who wrote a book, and she assigned to everyone as homework to turn to your partner to ask your partner, hey, what are your views on monogamy? And open up the conversation like that. My mantra is throw Rena under the bus. So, and of course, then you can answer it too. But if you are wanting to open up a relationship that has been historically closed, get very, very clear on your why, right? Because sometimes I've worked with several couples now who've come to me saying, we want to open up, or usually it's one person wants to open up and the other person does not. And when we start to dig into, okay, why does this partner want to open up the relationship? It's not that, hey, I want to have sex with other people. It's that they're actually seeking something that's currently missing in this relationship, but that they could work on before opening up. So turn inward and ask, okay, what is it about opening up the relationship that I want? Is it going to be a deal breaker for me if my partner says no? Right. But getting really clear on why you want to do this and then throw me under the bus and do it that way.
And then I have a much higher sexual energy than my husband, which is often a source of embarrassment, shame, and deeply hurt feelings in my marriage. Are there any suggestions in the book that can help overcome this? Yes, but
Ooh.
I'm going to let Rena expound on that.
Yes, yes. I mean, shame is really the core of everything I discuss because shame is this feeling I'm broken, I'm not normal, there's something wrong with me. And so, okay, higher sexual energy. Oh gosh. In some ways, I wish this weren't a webinar because I would have so many follow-up questions here about what you mean by higher sexual energy, what perhaps might be going on with your husband if this is a recent thing, right? Or if this has been going on for a while, if he has any sort of perhaps shame when it comes to sex. I'm going to point to another book. Yes, my book will help you with this, but there's a book by Sarah Hunter Murray, and it's called Not Always in the Mood. And it's basically these common myths that we have about male sexuality that have turned out to actually not be true. There's this common idea that men are just always raring, ready to go. And so when they're not, we take it really, really personally. So if you're looking to better understand where maybe he's coming from, I recommend reading that book. But I think absolutely my book will help you really attune to the fact that there's nothing broken or wrong with you. See if there's a way that you two can kind of find a way to bridge that gap. And if not, when I talk about practical reasons for opening up relationships, this can also be one of them where there's mismatched libido or libido discrepancy. So I think there are a lot of things. Oh, I live with a male partner who never wants sex. See, I have so many follow-up questions here. Gosh, gosh, I have follow-up questions. You people need to send me some DMs over on Instagram because I have follow-up questions. Um, yeah, there could be so many things at play here, but I know you said yes, this book will definitely help you. Anna, what do you think in my book would help this person the most? Because obviously, sometimes when you're so far into it, I wrote the damn thing. I can't see it from the outside, so I want to hear from you.
Well, so much of it for me, my partner and I have mismatched libidos sometimes. It's cyclical, the
Mhm.
libido mismatch for us. And just identifying that cycle has helped a whole lot with me not taking on that, like, there's something wrong with me, right? Um, but so much of it is just being able to have a frank conversation, right? Which I feel like is just like what the whole book is built around, like getting in touch with like what it is that's going on in me that's causing me to feel this way and where that's coming from and whether like some of my stuff is triggered by my past relationships. I've had my two longest term relationships in my adult life had ended up with just no sex at all for very different reasons.
Mhm.
So that whenever there's a libido mismatch for me, that immediately gets triggered. So being able to like get to the place where I recognize that's where that's coming from and then feeling comfortable expressing that, right? And some of that is just being in a relationship I feel emotionally safe in. I don't know. I didn't know that was an important thing. Um,
Right? Shocking.
but all of those, there's just so many tools in this book for like figuring out what's going on with me and then also like kind of some guidelines for how to have those conversations when you know that sometimes you and your partner aren't going to end up agreeing and knowing ahead of time, is it going to be a deal breaker if we can't find a space where we meet, um,
Right.
which had never
And that's
occurred to
what,
me.
yeah, is it going to be a deal breaker? And I think, I talk a lot about the importance of sexual compatibility in the book. And that's why I wish I knew a bit more about how long this has been going on. Because if this is, hey, we've been together 10 years and since day one, we have had mismatched libidos, right? That's a different story than, hey, my husband got laid off from his job 6 months ago, and all of a sudden he barely wants to have sex, right? We're talking about different things here. One thing that I discuss in the second part, section 2 of the book on how to have better relationships, is this idea of having relationship check-ins. And when you do those, whether you do those every other week or once a month, one of the things you can check in about is sex. And it can be, hey, on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you feel about how our sex life was over the past month, right? And say, anonymous attendee, you're like, I think we're at a 6. The question would become, okay, well, what could bring us to a 10? And so that's your ask. And it's not a complaint. Hey, I need sex. You're not giving it to me. This is, a safe space that we have co-created to talk about things. You can talk about finances, you can talk about childcare, you can talk about quality time, anything that you want to check in about on a regular basis. And it's a safe space to say, well, I wish we were having more of it. Like, is it a quantity thing or is it a quality thing? And so really that's what this book will help you do, is to give you the tools on how to start neutralizing these conversations so that they're not shameful for you and not shameful for your partner. Because I'll tell you, men, when it comes to virility and libido, there is an amount of shame there based on the book that I mentioned earlier, Not Always in the Mood, where it's like, the data tells us that men will initiate sex even when they're not in the mood. They will initiate when they're not in the mood because they feel like there's this standard of masculinity that they need to hold themselves to. So I can guarantee that there's probably a tremendous amount of unspoken shame going on in your husband's mind too. And so creating a safe space to discuss that uh, could be really transformational for both of you. Yeah.
Oh, and someone is asking the book about the male side. What is it called again?
It's called Not Always in the Mood, and it's by Sarah Hunter Murray. At first I thought, oh, my book, it's called The
I
Sex
know.
You
When I first saw it too, I was like, oh, I have it. Hang on.
Want. Okay, so how about for us single people, especially when a lot of these sexual encounters we're having don't have the years of buildup communication history? Yeah. How can you start having better sex as a single person? Well, there's a lesson, a chapter in the book called Do It Soon, in which I argue the virtues of not waiting too long to have sex.
It's one of my
But
favorite parts.
yeah, do it soon. Not this whole I'll wait until the third date or make him chase me and I gotta act like a prize or I gave it up, right? Even the language we use around sex implies that it's not ours. Like, I lost my virginity or he took my virginity or I gave it up. And instead, treat this as a way to gauge compatibility with another person. So think of other ways, if you first start dating, that you try to figure out whether you're compatible. Hey, what do you like to do for fun on the weekends? What's your favorite kind of food? What's your favorite restaurant? What kind of music do you like? Oh, we like kind of the same music. What are some of your favorite bands? Getting curious. And then when it comes to sex, there are a lot of ways to ease into this curiosity. I give you a ton of questions in the book and ways to find out and gauge some of that compatibility ahead of time. Like, I came up with a card game that if anyone wants to shoot me a message, I'm happy to send you like a PDF version of it. It's 269 sex and relationship conversation starters. I will give it to you for free because you were here. You're spending your Tuesday night hanging out on Zoom with us. But make this just another way that you can get curious to get to know the other person. Hey, do you have any kinks? Hey, what are your views on monogamy? These are questions that you can have over text message. They do not need to happen in the bedroom, right? Hey, how would you define hot sex? Right? Like, these kind of general questions. And so I think, yeah, insofar as not having the years of buildup and communication and history, I would imagine, Kristen, that you know how to get curious and ask questions to get to know someone outside of the bedroom. Treat sex like food. Get curious in asking, what are your likes? What are your dislikes? Is there anything that you have always wanted to try, but you haven't yet? And if you have these conversations outside of the bedroom, they're going to feel a lot less loaded. If you do it over text, it's the kind of thing where, oh, now I have some time to think about that. That's a really good question. So those are some easy tips that I can recommend giving you. Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, and so for the cards, if you shoot me a DM on Instagram, you can look up Rena Martine. It should come up, or it's underscore RENA dot Martine underscore, because someone else had already taken just Rena Martine. And just drop your email in there, and I'll send you the PDF of it. Yeah.
After my divorce, I, got on some dating apps for a while. Turns out the wrong ones, and now I know that. But I was
It
having
happens to all of us.
I was having a conversation with a guy that I ended up going out with, and before we met for the first time, I was asking him what he was into because at the time I knew I was right out of a serious relation. Well, not right out, it had been months, but it was my first time out after a serious relationship that had lasted too long, and I have a history of staying in relationships too long, and so I knew I wanted something casual. Um, and my friends, when I'm telling them, are like, "Why are you asking him these questions? You're gonna give him the impression," was like, that I wanna have sex with him? Because, like,
Right.
that's what I'm looking for, actually, so but then when I was getting ready to meet him for the first time, I was talking to a male friend of mine, and I am a jeans and t-shirt girl pretty much full time. It's like, I don't know what to wear to meet someone that I'm pretty much planning on bringing home unless he's, like, real weird when we meet in person. He was like, "Well, it's like a job interview. Like, you dress up like you're still trying to impress someone." But then when he
Dress for the
found
job you want.
Yes. But then when he found out that I'd fooled around with the guy on the first date, like, that was different, and I was like, "But it's like a job interview." Like,
Hmm.
do not hear the double standard there. Like, I this is what this is gonna be. I need to know if this is gonna be compatible for us or not. Because why keep meeting up with him and having coffee and doing all these things for a casual thing if
Right.
I'm not gonna know if we're compatible in the way that's gonna matter for this kind of relationship? But it was
Absolutely.
interesting to me that that's an okay thing to act like it's a job interview, like, dress like it's a job interview, but the sex part, that should wait.
That should wait. And I want to give a caveat here because some people are like, look, I don't want to have sex with somebody the first date. And that's totally fair. I am not suggesting that you need to hop into bed and do everything on the menu date one. I think it's important, though, to start gauging sexual compatibility early on. This can be by asking the questions that I mentioned without even doing anything physical. This can be a hot makeout. This can be doing things, first base, second base, third base. Anticipation is hot. But if you get into a scenario, which there are so many cautionary tales I write about in this book, because everything I'm warning you about is because I've been through it myself, right? You don't want to get into a scenario where you've waited, right? You've acted like the prize and you've given up the prize and you've waited so long that by that point, they've met your friends. You two like have plans together and then you finally do it and you realize, oh, I don't think we're actually compatible. And then you go through that thing where you think, well, is this such a small price to pay though when I'm already kind of all in? It's like that sunken cost fallacy. Like, well, I've already gotten this far, and then for me to break up with someone because of sex, does that make me a shallow person? So instead of getting to that point, start gauging compatibility early on. It's like you go to a restaurant that you even want to try out. You don't need to try everything on the menu, but if the appetizers are crap, it'll probably tell you that the main course isn't going to be very good either. So you go, you have a little happy hour at the restaurant. Maybe, you try a few appetizers and then see if you want to come back for dinner, right? But so yeah, gauge that early, but don't feel like, well, Rena says I need to have sex on the first date. No, that is not us. But if you want to, you absolutely can and go for it and have fun. Yes, if for those of us who have an Instagram deficiency, is there another way to contact you? You can email me. It's Rena, so Rena at renamartine.com.
I want to go back to something earlier in the book again, because it resonated so much with me. You talk about being the cool girl and why that doesn't work out. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Oof, you caught me on a good day. This has come up a lot with my coaching clients that I had earlier in the day. So the cool girl acts like she has no needs, right? Hey, you like sports? I like sports too. Um, oh, you want to do that? No, that's totally fine. Like I'm the cool girl. I don't rock the boat. And it's not the kind of girl who's a doormat. We're talking about two different things. The cool girl is somebody who acts like she has no needs around men because she's just that cool. And the problem is that that act can only last for so long. And if you are playing the cool girl, you are essentially wearing a mask. You're pretending to be someone else. That act can only last for so long. When that mask eventually starts to chip away, this person's going to be like, wait, you're not the person I signed up for, right? So it's not really fair to the people you're dating. But also, if you're keeping that mask up, you're not able to fully ever experience deep intimacy with another person. And the reason we play the cool girl is because we're trying to protect ourselves. We're trying to not get hurt. That's ultimately what this comes down to. So this makes sense on a fundamental level. Your brain is like, hey, if you're unflappable, then you can't get hurt. But just like we need sunscreen to protect us from the harmful rays of the sun, we also need vitamin D in order to survive. So, a lot of the exercises I give in the earlier parts of the book are designed to get you to chip away at this kind of perfectionist veneer. Exercises, telling you, all right, today you need to go out and ask somebody for help on something. Like giving you ways to express vulnerability because cool girls can't be vulnerable. That's the thing. That's the one thing they don't have in common. But, for many of us, we are rewarded in our day-to-day lives. I know I certainly was as a former prosecutor with the Los Angeles County DA's office. I was rewarded for being emotionless. And for those of us, we can really struggle to let that guard down and show up as ourselves in relationships and be vulnerable. So I give you tools to start chipping away at that because once you can drop the cool girl act, there's such this level of love and deep joy and connection and intimacy available to you that just it'll blow your mind. Like once I had done the work on myself and now the kind of connection I feel with people, it's like nothing I ever thought could exist. And that's why I'm like, everyone come over here. The water's warm and it's so good. Like it's such the good, juicy stuff in life. It's like, if you've had the best pizza you've ever had. Sorry, I'm going to Italy next month. So I've been doing some trip planning and thinking about pizza. But it's like if you've had the best pizza ever and you're like, oh my God, you're trying to shake everyone. You have not had pizza until you've had this pizza. That's how I feel with this kind of love and intimacy and connection. And yes, sex. And so that's why I want to convert all the cool girls over into vulnerable but strong women.
And what about women that are in relationships where maybe they feel like it's not safe for them for whatever reason? Not safe is probably not the right word. I use it in an emotional way, not like there's an
Mhm.
actual threat, but where the nature of their relationship makes them feel like maybe it's not going to be okay for them to be emotionally vulnerable with their partner. Like, what do
Mhm.
you advise for that? Has that come up in your intimacy coaching at all?
I mean, yes. And first of all, I would say that you might be surprised. I have seen scenarios come up where people think, well, my partner is just this kind of guy. Usually it's a guy, but I work with same sex couples too. But my partner's the kind of guy, he's not good at talking about his feelings. And so we make assumptions based on our partners. And 9 times out of 10, it's not that their partner doesn't talk about his feelings. It's one, he's never felt safe to do that either. And so creating this space, especially if the male partner knows that, she and I are working together, and creating a space where, hey, this is homework. Rena's making us talk about this stuff. Like, because a lot of men feel like, and they've been raised to believe that they shouldn't talk about these things. So that is one thing that once you start being vulnerable, sometimes they will let their guard down too. I give some product and app recommendations for couples in the book. Paired is one of those apps that I recommend. It's easy. You each get a question every day, you answer it, and it's giving your partner a little safe space to say, okay, I need to answer a question about what's a memory I have of both of us that makes me laugh, right? That's sweet. That's me opening up about my feelings just a little bit. And so kind of testing the waters in those small ways. But then say you're trying to do it and your partner absolutely will not budge. We will go back to the chapter. If it's not a fuck yes, it's a no, right? Is this the kind of relationship you want to be in? When you imagine what the purpose of a relationship is, what the purpose of romantic love is, does the relationship you're in embody that? And if it doesn't, why are you staying? So I give a whole list of like questions to go through because some people say, I stay for the kids, I stay for this, I stay for that. And so what do you do in those scenarios? And how do you then ultimately figure out, can I salvage this? Can I not? At what point do we call it quits? So yeah, but I think going in, always assume best of intentions. Always assume that your partner, as humans, we want to be able to open up to one another. We are hardwired for connection. As former hunters and gatherers, we are hardwired to be in community. But because of the way we are raising or have raised boys for a very, very long time in this society, a lot of boys and men, now men, don't feel safe to use their voice and to share their emotions.
What was your favorite part of writing the book? I know you're already working with clients and the book comes out of that. So I guess both what was your favorite part and what was the hardest part about translating your practice with clients into writing?
Ooh, okay. I mean, the hardest part honestly was really picking which stories to tell. So as you know, I crammed a lot of stories in, but for different chapters, I was like, okay, there are 5 people I can think whose story illustrates this concept well. So finding that, I mean, on a logistical level, literally pouring through that many pages of notes and all my client notes for all my clients, that took some time. That was really hard though. And of course, since submitting the final manuscript of the book over a year ago, I've had so many other stories with clients, so many other stories in my own life. So that is hard in terms of like, I've got to get everything in, and you realize that you can't and that it's impossible. And so that's what, other media are for. That's what the newsletter is for. That's what podcast interviews are for. That's what a second book is for, and all of those things. Um, and the one thing I really enjoyed most about the process of writing is also the thing that that I found to be really difficult is the process was very lonely for me. You'll see a lot of folks out there, especially fiction writers, who are like, yeah, I have a writers group and I've always wanted to be a writer. And this I never thought I'd be writing a self-help book. So this isn't something that has been, in my bucket list for a very long time. I didn't have a community and an infrastructure set up to be able to bounce ideas off of people. So it felt very lonely at times. But also, on the other hand of that, some days I love just like, oh my gosh, I get to work in my PJs all day, or I get to be out in a cabin in the woods and just write for like 5 straight days. And there was something so nice about that because in my business, I kind of get pulled in a lot of different directions and multitasking, and being able to just focus and say, no, my only job today is to write. So in that way, it was the thing I loved most, but also the thing that made me lonely too. Yeah, Tara, that's real. That's real. The same thing. So I had my book launch event here last month at a bookstore in LA, and I was on a panel with two other women. One is an intimacy coordinator for film and TV, and the other one is a sexologist. And we talked about how, for many of us, especially those working in male dominated fields, the things that allow us to be really good at our jobs in our day to day are the exact things that are holding us back in our relationships and in our dating lives. So this phenomenon, this cool girl phenomenon, if I had to look at patterns I've seen with clients of mine, it tends to show up more. Like the more high ranking you are in your day to day, the more badass bitch you are in your day to day, even if it's not, from a financial perspective, but kind of how you operate in the world, you are going to be the most susceptible to cool girl when it comes to your relationships. But luckily, I give you some pretty easy tools in the book to start chipping away at those things. But once you start seeing them, you can't unsee them. That's the thing. She's like, oh gosh, I'm being the cool girl. But think about this too. I mean, in male dominated industries, we can be vulnerable and strong and actually give some of these men a space to do the same. So kind of leading by example in a way too, for what that's worth.
Yeah, it's for me the underlying theme of all of it was just authenticity, right? Like everything in the book is like being able to be in your authentic self all the time. And I have talked about for a few years now how blessed I am in my job that I've always been able to be just fully who I am. And that's changed. It's been most of my adult life at the bookstore that I'm at now. So who I authentically am has changed a lot in that time. Um, and I've just at every stage been able to be who I am. And
Ugh,
everyone has that.
not everyone. I mean, I get to have pink hair now. Are you kidding me? I never would have been able to do this when I was a prosecutor, when I was a lawyer, having to go to court every day. There's no way. So I understand what that feels like about the feeling of of needing to wear two hats, and that level of cognitive dissonance. That's real. That is real. And so if you can't, quit your career like I did and go get paid to talk about sex all day, what do you do? How do you find your people? Whole chapter in the book called Find Your People. Even if you can't transition your career in that way, or maybe, you're growing up in a community that doesn't necessarily share your values, how do you find people to make you feel normal, to help you feel normal instead of feeling like an outcast? Because that was so much of my struggle, is feeling like there's no one out there like me. Like I'm the only one suffering here. And so the tools to finding people who are your community is just so, so powerful. Oh, thank you. I love the pink hair too. I love it. It can be a pain in the ass to maintain, but I still love it. It ain't going anywhere.
No, and I know for me, the finding my people really started with my girlfriends. Like I
Hmm.
got to kind of start branching out because I don't know, it's always been easier for me to be vulnerable in spaces with female friends.
Yeah.
Um, and so I got to kind of have practice run conversations whenever I encountered something new that I thought might sound fun to me. Like, just be like, hey, do any of you have any experience with this? Does this sound crazy and messed up? And sometimes it did, right? But like, and sometimes it turned out it wasn't something I was interested in. It was just something I came across but I could sort of work through that stuff in a place where I felt safe. So then when I got into a healthy relationship, romantic relationship for the first time, I had some practice with like, this
Yeah.
is just who I am. And I know that I can talk about this and you may not respond the same way, but I'm going to be okay no matter what.
Yeah. And knowing that's what's not for you, or what's for you won't move past you, right? And what's not for you will move past you. And knowing that you can that you have permission to ask for what you want and state your needs, because a lot of people operate through the world, especially when it comes to our love lives, and if you're dating, with this kind of scarcity mentality, right? Like I can't be too picky. I'm gonna end up alone if I'm too picky. I will say this, people are attracted to folks who have boundaries and who have desires and who have interests. I don't think anyone wants to be in a relationship with someone who's like, I just like whatever you like. That's boring, right? That's boring. We want someone who's excited about us. We want somebody who's going to enhance our lives. We want someone who, when they say yes, they mean yes because you damn well believe if they mean no, they're going to say no. But I mean, it makes sense that you would feel initially more comfortable having those conversations with female friends because let's be real, like there's we're wired at this point to kind of to fear men because they are the ones who have harmed our safety for a really long time. And so being able to say, okay, this was safe. I spoke openly in this space to my female friends, and this felt safe, is sending data to your brain like, okay, this is safe to do. And then you try doing it in relationships, and you're like, huh, okay, I didn't die. This might be safe to do. And in fact, maybe I was treated better because I, from the get-go, was open about my boundaries and my interests, right? And then you go from there. But it's always in baby steps, like anything. I For anyone here who hasn't read the book, babyest steps is
Mhm.
a term that you see often in there. And do everything in the babyest steps. Yeah.
Yeah, and you mentioned the scarcity mentality. I also, and upon review, having gone back and looked at where all the messaging came from, right? Like now I have new information, but I also like entered relationships with this idea that there were like goalposts. That, like I needed to
Mhm.
get to this. Like there was an idea of where this was supposed to go and kind of a timeline where we should get there.
Mhm.
And for the first time in my life, like I'm not interested in getting married again, which is a nice thing to know going into a relationship. Like this is not a place I want to go. So if that's a place you want to go, like maybe this isn't right for us. But where
Absolutely.
those goalposts have kind of disappeared for me, and
Mhm.
uh, and so it's it's done something about the scarcity mentality, but also I think a lot of us go in with that. Like there's a trajectory that we should be on here that isn't even ours. That's just like what we feel like is supposed to happen.
Right. And examining all the ways in which that shows up and what you're talking about is really the relationship escalator.
Mhm.
So we follow this trajectory. You meet someone, you start dating, you fall in love, you move in together, you get engaged, you get married, you buy a house, you have kids, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there is this expected trajectory. And for some people, that is what we genuinely want. And that's okay. But for some of us, we are told that that's what we're supposed to want. I was one of those people who did everything I was supposed to do, had the successful husband, all the things, and was like, wait a second, I'm not happy. Like, why? And so fast forward to now where I'm living a polyamorous life, as I told you all. My partner and I, my primary partner, we live around the corner from one another, a 4-minute walk. It is glorious. I don't know that I will get married again. I'm not opposed to it. I'm not jaded about marriage. I'm just like, I don't know, like, what's the point? I know I'm not having kids because I had my fallopian tubes removed a few years ago by choice. So, and I really enjoy living apart. Some people, they're not into that idea, but for me, like, oh my gosh, this works really well. And I don't care if people judge me for it. I'm like, you're not in this relationship. You're not in my head. You're not the one who gets to relish in, eating cold pizza in her bathrobe and watching TV without anyone telling me I'm not allowed to do that, right? And so it's figuring out what you want, right? And that's one of the reasons why this book is called The Sex You Want. It should really just be called The Life You Want or The Intimacy You Want. But what you want and peeling apart, like, okay, is this what I've been told I'm supposed to want, or is this what I actually want? And then from there, designing a life that you want and only you want, and deciding, what kind of partners you want in that life, what kind of sex you want in that life, but giving you permission to take a step back and say, hey, let's wave the magic wand here. What would you want your life to look like if shame, fear, and obligation were not options? Because a lot of us have never been given that space to imagine in that way.
Yeah, I was prepping for this event tonight, and so I was going back through my written exercises from when I was reading the book. And the thing that stuck out to me the most in rereading it was the exercise of what your life would look like if shame just disappeared for me. I can't remember exactly the phrasing from the book now, but I was like, "Oh, right." Like
Are you
that.
willing to share anything? Now I'm putting you on the spot.
I mean, so much of it for me, because I have a lot of people pleasing tendencies. It's been an issue for a long time. I haven't been unaware of it, but I haven't been doing anything about it either. Was just like feeling like it's okay for me to say that I don't want to do something. Like saying no to people is really difficult for me. Not in sex specifically, but just in general. Like, no, I don't want to do that. Like, no is a complete sentence people keep telling me, and I
Uh-huh.
can't. If I'm going to say no, there's gonna be a 30-minute diatribe as to why I have to tell you no so that I feel okay. So much of the shame stuff for me is this idea that, like, I have to be available to support everyone around me all the time, and if I'm not
Mhm.
doing that, then that's something wrong with me. And just, like, being able to say, like, "No, I need a night off to read my book, and I'm just gonna stay home and do that, thanks." Like, that's what it would look like for me. There's no big
Yeah.
lofty things at this point, but
Yeah. And think about if a friend said that to you, "Hey, no, I don't feel like going out. I think I really just want to stay home and read my book tonight, but I would love to see you soon." Would you think, "Oh my gosh, that bitch?"
no, I know. No, but and on the flip side of that, where if it's not a fuck yes, it's a no, that applies to so many things. Like, how would I feel if a friend said yes and showed up when she clearly didn't really wanna be there? Like,
Right.
that's not good for anyone.
No, and I have a dear friend like that where she will say yes to everything and then just complain like behind, to me, like, I now I have to go to this birthday or I have to go to this. I'm like, well, why did you say yes? Well, because, so I say, look, at any situation, any decision you have to make, whether this is, hey, do you want to go get dinner tonight? Or, do you want to go on this trip back east to see your partner's family? If you were to say yes to this, is that coming from a place of love or a place of fear? So, for example, are you saying yes because I just don't want to deal with the backlash of it if I say no, rather than I'm saying yes because that sounds really fun? And so I think of that a lot in my own life in things like exactly what you were talking about. Like, oh, am I saying yes out of obligation or is this because I actually want to do this? Granted, there are certainly things in life that we say yes to that we aren't 1,000% resounding fuck yes about. But if you find yourself saying yes all the time and then resenting, the people around you will know that you are a yes person and a people pleaser, and they'll probably think like, look, I have no idea if she's even having fun because she says yes to everything, right?
Yeah.
You're, yeah. Like that's the thing is that your yes is meaningless if you don't know how to use your no. And you can do that with such kindness too, which is it could be, "Hey, I'm feeling tired," or "I'm wrapped in this book and I'm going to be crappy company tonight because all I'm going to be thinking about is this page turner that I'm reading." Like I canceled a date when I read Gone Girl. I swear I did. I was like, I'm sorry, but I cannot see you tonight because I'm just going to be wishing I was at home doing this. Can we meet up in like 3 days? This is many years ago, but that's okay. Like that's cute. It builds character too.
And then I know we're running out of time, but there was one more question. Is it common for religious upbringing to have an effect on your sexual ideals? Which, like, just arbitrarily, I feel like is a yes.
Yes. Yes. I mean, there are very few sex positive religions out there. And absolutely, I give a lot of kind of concrete examples of how I've seen that show up in my clients' lives. But yes. And so the question becomes like, how does my religion's view on sex benefit the tenets of this religion and who is it benefiting? Right. Like, who does it benefit that women are supposed to wait until marriage? Or, like taking it really like a meta step back and asking, like, who do these ideals benefit? And then reminding yourself that the clitoris is the only part of the human body whose sole purpose is pleasure, and that we, as folks who were assigned female at birth, we're the ones who get to enjoy that. Like, if we're gonna go into, deep religion and God and what we're made to do and to not do, why would our bodies have been made to experience pleasure in that way? But yes, long answer to what's a very short answer, Tara or Tara, which is very common, very common.
Okay. Well, I think last thing, because I know we're out of time, but you mentioned one book that you recommend for a specific issue. Are there any other books you recommend for people besides yours, The Sex You Want?
Yes.
People that are wanting to explore more, getting down into intimacy and sex, either or.
Absolutely. There are so many. I'm going to recommend one that I believe should be required reading for every woman, and it's called Come As You Are by Dr. Emily Nagoski. I consider that to be kind of the Bible in terms of women's sexuality. And you think I come up with some good analogies? That woman is the queen. Her stuff is so easy to understand. She's absolutely great. And then if there's something specific that anyone has a question on, like, hey, Rena, I want a book on non-monogamy or I want a book on attachment styles, send me a DM or email me. And I'm happy to give you more tailored because I have so many book recommendations. But everyone just start with my book, of course. But Come As You Are by Dr. Emily Nagoski is fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there anything else you want to say in closing before we sign off?
Just thank you all for being here. It's a testament to, everyone wanting to work on themselves, that this is how you're spending your Tuesday nights. So thank you for being in community.
Yeah, thank you, attendees, for showing up. If you haven't already purchased the book, we do still have more in stock, so you can pick them up tomorrow morning starting at 11, or order through our website and we can ship them to you if you're not local to us. And thank you, Rena, for spending your Tuesday evening with us. I hope you go have pizza for dinner since you've been talking about it a little bit. You said you were going
Oh, I wish. I'm having
to.
burgers for dinner, but I won't complain about that either. Thank you so much, Anna, and thank you for everyone who I can't see, but I hope to hear from you soon.
Thank you. Everybody have a great evening.